moments in life when we've done nothing wrong. We're simply living, doing our work, having a quiet conversation, and suddenly, a disrespectful remark strikes. It might be a sarcastic jab, a public insult, or a look laced with contempt. In that instant, many of us react instinctively with anger, defensiveness, or a counterattack to reclaim our ground. This video won't teach you how to strike back in the usual way. It doesn't endorse revenge or encourage clever comebacks for the sake of victory. What you're about to learn is a higher form of response, a blend of inner strength, emotional discipline, and complete self-mastery. Together, we'll explore how to respond to rudeness with words that carry weight without volume, that cut through without insult, and that quietly compel the other to reflect on themselves. 1. You have the right to speak your mind, and I have the right not to care. Because not every word deserves a reply. In a world where everyone rushes to express their opinion, the danger lies not in what's said, but in how easily we let it matter. A careless comment, a personal judgment, a shallow opinion. Any of these can spark anger in the listener. If the listener lacks inner steadiness, this is where Stoic philosophy offers us a core principle. What others say is their concern. How we respond is entirely ours. The phrase, "You have the right to speak your mind, and I have the right not to care," is more than a clever comeback. It's a boundary, unkind but unmistakable, a firm declaration that says, "I hear your words, but I won't let them occupy my mind." In today's climate, where freedom of speech is prized, but accountability for speech is risky, choosing not to respond to what's unworthy becomes the highest form of freedom. This phrase proves especially useful when someone tries to provoke, insult, or emotionally manipulate us. They hurl harsh remarks hoping to trigger a reaction. A furrowed brow, a defensive plea, a heated argument, and when they get nothing, they lose what they were truly after: control over our emotions. That's the key. Those who offend don't always seek to win an argument. They seek to shake our stability. Every time we react, we hand over our power. But when we remain still, or reply with calm indifference like, "I don't care," we reclaim it. A Stoic understands that not all words carry equal weight. A sincere suggestion from the waist is not the same as a sneer from a chronic critic, and no one is obliged to treat both with equal energy. Choosing not to care isn't weakness or apathy. It's intentional, it's discernment, it's conserving inner strength for what truly matters. To be clear, this phrase isn't confrontational. It's not an insult, nor a mockery. It's a neutral response, measured, calm, and final. It closes the door on unhealthy dialogue. The other person may feel disappointed or upset, but their feelings are no longer your burden. You are not responsible for emotions you didn't intend to provoke. In workplaces, on social media, even within families, places where conversations can quickly slip into disrespect, this phrase becomes a shield. It defends your boundaries without shouting or rage. It creates necessary space without damaging professionalism or connection. The truth is, many people don't speak because they believe. They speak to manipulate. They speak to sow doubt, diminish others, or simply to feel in control. And without awareness, we fall into that trap. We argue, explain ourselves, grow exhausted, and gain nothing. From the Stoic perspective, we don't need to reply to win with logic. We only need not to lose ourselves to emotion. When someone speaks harshly, it doesn't define us. It defines them, their wisdom, their calm, their character. Our response defines our own. What's the principle behind this reply? It's the freedom to choose what we let in. Stoicism teaches that what lies outside us, including others' words, cannot touch the mind unless we allow it. What we control is thought, action, and response. Everything else, even the cruelest insult, is beyond our power, and if it lies beyond our power, letting it invade the mind only weakens us. One more thing, you don't owe anyone a defense. You don't need to argue to prove your point. You don't need to explain so they understand. Sometimes the most powerful statement is indifference. I don't need your agreement. I don't need your approval. And in that freedom, you become untouchable. Often, you'll find the other person unsettled when you don't react as expected. They may ask, "What do you mean?" Or, "You're not going to respond," hoping to draw you back into battle. But if you hold your ground with no anger, no hatred, just calm disinterest, their weapons fall useless. The real power of this phrase lies not in how often you say it, but in how deeply you believe it. If it's just a slogan, it's empty. But if you live with the understanding that not every word deserves your attention, you'll discover a kind of freedom that cannot be shaken. This is not numbness, it's wise selection. You choose what enters your mind as you choose what enters your body. No one hoards trash in their home, so why store harmful words in your head? In the end, you have the right to speak your mind, and I have the right not to care. Is more than a response. It's a philosophy, a shield against chaos, a way to preserve your peace, focus, and mental clarity. In practicing this response, you don't just avoid unnecessary pain. You build an inner fortress that few can disturb. 2. If I got $1 every time you said something smart, I'd still be broke. A subtle jab that cuts deep enough to prompt reflection. In daily life, we often encounter those who prefer speaking to listening. They interrupt, assert their opinions, or spout confident statements, lacking real depth. These individuals aren't rare. They might be co-workers, relatives, old classmates, or strangers online. The common thread: they love the sound of their voice more than the process of learning. At times, they believe speaking, regardless of truth or value, is proof of their intelligence. In such moments, the line, "If I got $1 every time you said something smart, I'd still be broke," becomes an emblematic response. It isn't an insult, nor a personal attack. It's witty funny. Humor used to reveal a deeper truth, that what's being said is hollow, lacking substance. This remark carries 2 layers. On the surface, it's gentle mockery, subtle enough to make someone wince at the realization that their words lack weight. On a deeper level, it sends a quiet message: "I'm listening, but I hear nothing of meaning." It's the kind of response that doesn't raise its voice, yet still makes the other pause and reconsider. Its impact lies in how it critiques content, not character. This is especially valuable in settings where professionalism or basic decorum must be preserved, like at work or in public. Instead of engaging in emotional arguments or heated confrontation, this line helps you maintain both poise and position without losing inner control. What's worth noting is that this reply doesn't stem from emotion, but from intellect and composure. When delivered with a calm voice and perhaps a subtle smile, it leaves no room for the other to retaliate with outrage. They might grow uneasy, embarrassed, or try to laugh it off, but inwardly they'll likely reflect, even if just for a brief moment. Within the Stoic framework, using such remarks is not about winning debates. It's about preserving self-mastery and psychological boundaries. When others try to impose their inflated thoughts through grandstanding, a concise, sharp, humorous reply signals you're not easily swept away. You don't need to refute every point or prove your wisdom. You simply show that their words aren't worth your energy or emotion. This line can also function as a reset button in conversations. When someone speaks excessively, rambles, or uses their voice to signal superiority, you don't need to interrupt or ask them to stop. A light jab like this can shift the tone forcing them to confront the absurdity of their delivery. However, tone and context are key. This line should not be delivered with contempt or mockery. It risks being perceived as a personal attack. Instead, it should be spoken with tranquility, as a candid observation, not a hostile one. Done right, it asserts your agency while keeping the conversation from spiraling into conflict. It's undeniable. Those who speak for effect, for dominance, or without thought often overpower others in conversation. They wield words like weapons, not to share truth, but to command space and attention. Without clarity, the listener becomes reactive, drawn into fruitless debate, or crushed beneath the weight of bluster. This phrase, then, becomes a quiet circuit breaker, cutting off their psychological influence without open confrontation. Seen from another angle, if I got $1 every time you said something smart, I'd still be broke. It's a declaration of value in communication. It reminds us that speaking a lot doesn't equal speaking well. True value lies in content, precision, and thought, not in volume, length, or confidence. It echoes a Stoic truth. Don't be seduced by the noise. Learn to discern what's truly worth hearing. When used wisely, you'll find the other person more cautious in future conversations. They'll recognize you're not easily overrun or dazzled by empty speech. That awareness creates a quiet kind of authority, a power not born from volume, but from unshakable presence. Ultimately, this line isn't meant to diminish anyone, but to highlight that real worth lies not in word count, but in the clarity and depth of thought. It protects your conversational space from noise and helps you remain clear-headed, discerning what's truly worth absorbing. 3. I don't argue with those who use disrespect as a way of life, because there's no reason to wade into the mud with those who thrive in it. In everyday life, it's not hard to encounter people who carry an attitude of disdain, those who use their words to dominate, mock, or personally attack. For them, communication is no longer a form of connection, but a power game where the loudest, sharpest, or most hurtful voice wins. These individuals don't seek understanding or mutual growth. They care only about asserting dominance and taking control of your emotions. In such cases, a response like, "I don't argue with those who use disrespect as a way of life," is not just wise. It is a clear expression of self-control and inner discipline. This statement is not an escape from dialogue, but a line in the sand. Not every exchange deserves to be called a conversation. Some people, through their choice of words and body language, make it clear they're not here to listen or understand. They are here to prove they're right, you're wrong, and they have the right to say whatever they please, regardless of how it makes others feel. In such situations, continuing the discussion doesn't serve reason. It becomes a senseless clash, fueled by contempt. Stoic philosophy teaches us that not everyone is worthy of a response, not because they are beneath us, but because their intent in communication contradicts the values we aim to preserve. When someone relies on contempt, ridicule, or sarcasm as a way to argue with you, the nature of the conversation is already corrupted. It ceases to be a dialogue between two rational adults and becomes a stage for emotional outbursts. To stay engaged is to fall into the very trap they've laid. I don't argue with those who use disrespect as a way of life is a firm refusal. No harsh rebuttals, no intellectual grandstanding, just a calm assertion. I'm not participating. That single line carries more inner strength than the sharpest retort, because it denies the one thing your opponent craves most: your emotional reaction. In many cases, the rude person doesn't need your agreement. They need your anger, a scowl, a counterattack, or a tense posture. These are the rewards they seek. Every Rios action is fuel for further provocation. The longer it goes on, the more you lose ground, drifting further from the calm that anchors self-mastery. Refusing to argue is not passive silence. It is a conscious act. It's the declaration that you won't be dragged into emotional mud while they try to seize control through aggression. You maintain true control by guarding the only thing you fully own: your response. Disrespect shows not just in words, but in the way someone denies others emotional space and the right to be heard. People with this attitude rarely care what you have to say. They only wait for their turn to speak again. They interrupt, belittle, insult, armed with sarcasm and verbal humiliation. This is no longer an exchange of ideas. It's a form of verbal aggression. When you choose to argue with someone like this, you enter their arena. In that space, reason is not the strongest weapon. Emotional endurance and retaliation are, and if that's not your nature, you'll quickly find yourself drained, unsettled, and cornered. The more you explain, the deeper you fall into their trap, because they aren't listening to understand. They listen to critique. So declaring you won't argue with such a person isn't retreat, it's self-preservation. You refuse to hand over your energy to a toxic exchange. You protect your mind from being swept into their negativity. And most importantly, you refuse to become a distorted version of yourself in reaction to their rudeness. The real power of this statement lies in how it stops escalation. In emotionally charged arguments, every word can be twisted, every reply turned into a personal offense. But when you end it with a clear boundary, you send a message: this is the line. And if they keep pushing, they are no longer participants. They are intruders. At that point, your silence or withdrawal becomes a wordless declaration. I'm not someone you can pull down with you. Stoicism does not teach us to avoid conflict, but to choose our battles wisely. Not every word requires a reply. Not every provocation deserves attention. Once you grasp that, you'll see that refusing to argue is not defeat, it's victory in defense of your own peace. When you use this phrase, you don't need validation. You don't need them to go quiet or change immediately. What matters is that you did not allow yourself to be pulled from your place of calm. And in that, you remained in control. It is a silent triumph. One that says, without striking a blow, you cannot move me. 4. That attitude won't take you far in life. A reminder, not an attack, merely reflecting the path they're on. In every social setting, from the workplace to school, to everyday interactions, attitude shapes how others perceive and respond to a person. Attitude here includes more than external behavior. It reflects one's manner, speech, respect for others, and how one's handles conflict. Some use arrogance, defiance, or contempt as a shield to project superiority. They believe that toughness, sarcasm, or sharpness are tools of influence, ways to force compliance or protect their status. In such contexts, the phrase "that attitude won't take you far in life" isn't a direct critique. It's a subtle warning. It signals that the current behavior points toward a dangerous trajectory, one that leads to isolation and long-term failure. It's not aggression, but a mirror gently held up, inviting them to see the consequences of the path they've chosen. When someone uses negativity as their mode of interaction, always harsh, condescending, or rude, they may win temporary advantages. People might yield to avoid conflict or submit for convenience, but over time, such conduct erodes trust, breeds resentment, and severs meaningful relationships. A negative attitude works like a fast-acting drug with quiet, long-term damage. One might win every argument, but lose entirely in the journey of character and career. This phrase isn't an attack on the person. It simply points to an inevitable outcome. The attitude you cultivate today becomes the environment you live in tomorrow. If your behavior creates tension, conflict, and disrespect, you will, sooner or later, find yourself surrounded by avoidance and mistrust. Few want to work long-term with someone who consistently makes others feel small or unvalued. Its strength lies in its composure. No anger, no shouting, no blame, just calmly spoken truth and steady eye contact. And suddenly, they realize they've been closing doors they didn't even know existed. The phrase is like a caution sign. It doesn't force a stop, but demands a glance at the road ahead. In professional settings, this feedback can be especially effective. When someone uses power, rank, or harsh language to suppress others, they might get immediate results. But the real question isn't, how many times have you won? It's, who still wants to walk beside you? This phrase targets that core issue, the long road ahead, shaped entirely by today's choices. That's also why the phrase often stops people mid-track. Unlike confrontational rebuttals that trigger ego and resistance, this one opens space for quiet introspection. No one wants to be told they'll fail, but it's hard to reject a calm observation that this attitude won't take you far. It's a form of awakening that carries no insult, only humanity. Attitude can't hide forever. Disrespect and arrogance leak through eyes, gestures, and words, no matter how carefully masked. And in today's hyper-connected world, how you treat others becomes your living resume. This phrase doesn't just reflect that truth. It urges the listener to change before consequences become irreversible. Moreover, using this phrase also reveals the speaker's moral grounding. They don't choose to attack. They don't use heavy words to shame. They simply offer directional insight, a quiet reminder that every road leads somewhere. And if one continues with a toxic attitude, they may arrive at a place they never wanted to be. It's the difference between tearing someone down and trying to wake them up. In today's world, where success depends not only on skill, but on how we treat others, attitude becomes a form of invisible capital. A person might be highly competent, even brilliant, but if their manner consistently wounds others, their growth will inevitably hit a ceiling. The phrase, "that attitude won't take you far in life," is thus not just a situational comment. It's a logical forecast grounded in how the real world works. Its impact grows when spoken in front of others, not to humiliate, but to reflect collective awareness. When witnesses remain silent but clearly agree, the person with the toxic attitude is compelled to reconsider. No one wants to be seen as divisive or immature. In essence, that attitude won't take you far in life is a warning, not a weapon. It allows the speaker to remain composed, demonstrate emotional intelligence, and send a clear message. Disrespect is not a path to lasting success, and if the listener is clear-minded enough to receive it, they'll see it not as insult, but as a valuable, real-world reminder, one that everyone eventually must face. 5. This conversation ended before it began, because sometimes silence is the most powerful way to extinguish conflict. In communication, there are moments when words cease to connect and instead become tools of provocation, manipulation, or insult. Such conversations are no longer about understanding, but turn into arenas where one party seeks to dominate the other through negativity, sharp language, or disrespect. In such situations, the phrase, "this conversation ended before it began," becomes a powerful statement that this exchange will not proceed on terms you do not consent to. It carries no extended rhetoric, no threatening tone, and requires no explanation. Its impact lies in its finality and calm. It is not a slammed door in anger, but a quiet and deliberate end to a conversation unworthy of continuation. This phrase is especially effective when the other person is deliberately trying to drag you into a pointless argument. They may begin with a provocative comment, a confrontational posture, or a string of sarcastic questions. They're not seeking mutual understanding. They want your reaction, your anger, your defenses, your loss of composure. And when you say, "This conversation ended before it began," you're refusing to step onto their battlefield. What gives this response its power is that it doesn't fight back, doesn't retaliate. It simply withdraws your presence from a toxic space. You make no concessions, no admissions of guilt or rightness. You simply state, "This is not a conversation you choose to be part of." In Stoic philosophy, the ability to control one's response is a central expression of character. This phrase embodies that principle. It demonstrates composure and indulgency. You are not driven by someone else's words, but master of your own conversational space. No one can compel you to engage where mutual respect is absent. Many of life's conflicts don't erupt from great problems, but from a failure to stop in time. A sarcastic remark answered with a biting reply, a look of contempt returned with tension. And so conflict grows, spiraling into full-blown discord. But if one party is wise enough to end it early, clearly and decisively, conflict can be extinguished before it sparks. This phrase is that decisive act, a stop before things spiral out of control. Not every conversation deserves continuation. Some words are spoken not to build, but to stir negative emotion. Some people speak not to share, but to invade your thoughts, your emotions, your sense of control. Ending it early is not weakness, but a clear recognition. This is not where your energy belongs. The phrase is also a quiet warning. It reminds the other person that their behavior does not warrant continued interaction. When they hear it, they understand a boundary has been set, not through yelling or insults, but through a calm and fair declaration. "I don't accept this kind of dialogue." The effect is not just halting a conversation, but prompting the other to reflect on the attitude they bring. In professional environments, this response helps preserve composure without damaging your image. Instead of engaging in a heated debate in front of colleagues or clients, you can use this phrase as a strategic withdrawal, preserving both your personal boundaries and your professional presence. However, the effectiveness of this line depends on inner confidence. It cannot be used as a defensive or evasive gesture. If it's said to avoid accountability, it loses its weight. But if spoken with intention, as a choice to disengage from a toxic exchange, it becomes a form of quiet power, one that makes it impossible for the other to keep pressing. Another key point: this response doesn't invite confrontation. It doesn't escalate the situation or open the door to further conflict. On the contrary, it shuts down the argument with a statement so clear there's no room left for continuation. In many cases, it forces the other person to adjust, either to pull back or reflect, because without an opponent, they are left to face themselves. The phrase "this conversation ended before it began" also highlights that knowing when to stop is just as important as knowing when to start. Initiating a conversation is everyone's right, but no one is obligated to sustain one that has strayed from basic respect. Knowing when to end it reflects an understanding of limits, both yours and theirs, and protects your mental space from unnecessary violation. Ultimately, this response is a clear rejection of being pulled into emotional spirals. It's the declaration of someone who controls the game, who refuses to react on demand, who chooses not to be ruled by sudden emotions. When you say this, you don't just end a conflict. You affirm, "I choose calm, I choose control, I choose not to participate." 6. Thanks for the feedback. I'll forget it immediately. A frosty thank you that strips the insult of its weight. In today's communication landscape, not all feedback stems from good intentions. Some remarks are disguised as constructive, yet are in truth veiled attacks. It might be a subtle jab at your appearance, a sarcastic comment about your competence, or an indirect critique meant to chip away at your confidence. Such words are not meant to build. They are weapons meant to sow doubt, wound, or assert the speaker's superiority. In these moments, the response, "Thanks for the feedback, I'll forget it immediately," becomes a masterstroke. No anger, no argument, just a clean dismissal of the insult's impact. The phrase takes the shape of polite gratitude, but carries a clear message. I won't let what you said take root in my mind. Rather than refute, you acknowledge the comment with the bare minimum, a thank you, and immediately strip it of influence by declaring you'll forget it. This response reflects absolute emotional control and establishes a protective distance between you and the negativity just thrown your way. What gives this reaction power is its subtle irony, sharp yet non-hostile. The other person knows the gratitude isn't genuine, and the line, "I'll forget it immediately," is a firm refusal to internalize what was said. It neutralizes the attack, leaving the speaker with no psychological leverage, because their words have clearly failed to land. When someone offers cutting feedback, their goal is rarely to help. They aim to disrupt, to make you second guess, to provoke overthinking, to draw a defense. Responding in the usual way, defending or debating, grants them that power. But when you thank them and discard their words, you deny them that satisfaction and quietly assert you are the full authority over your own thoughts. This phrase proves especially useful in competitive environments, where commentary is often cloaked in diplomacy. Whether in meetings, work emails, or social media exchanges, negative remarks are inevitable. A response like this, light, courteous yet final, keeps you from getting pulled into conflict while preserving a calm, professional, and unshakable image. From a strategic standpoint, it also breaks the cycle of toxic engagement. When the one offering barbed comments gets no emotional reaction, they lose momentum. They expect condition, frustration, or anger, and when they receive none, the game ends. This not only reduces the likelihood of future jabs, but forces them to reassess the effectiveness of their approach. Importantly, the line "I'll forget it immediately" isn't a blanket rejection of all criticism. It's selective discernment. It signals that you can distinguish between meaningful insight and empty voices. This aligns closely with Stoic teaching, which emphasizes the power to govern one's inner world and choose deliberate responses. You are not obliged to retain everything said to you. You hold the right to decide what deserves space in your mind. Tone matters. If spoken with sarcasm or defiance, it may escalate tension, but delivered in a flat, almost emotionless tone, it becomes a reflective mirror, showing the insult had no entry point. You heard it. You responded, but you did not absorb it. This phrase also creates a rare balance in communication. It's not outright rejection, but also not acceptance. It shows you are neither hurt, nor convinced, nor manipulated. This composed contradiction often disorients the speaker. They can't easily gauge your emotions, and in that discomfort, they are pushed to reflect on their delivery. Over time, using this response helps establish clear boundaries between you and negative energy. Others begin to realize you are not easily rattled, not a willing recipient of words designed to wound. They'll tread more carefully, or shift their tone if they hope to be taken seriously. In personal relationships, this line is also effective against passive-aggressive communication. Those veiled suggestions that are really subtle digs. When someone tries to undermine or belittle you with disguised criticism, this phrase closes the exchange without creating an argument. It protects your mental space while preserving a baseline of civility. In essence, "Thanks for the feedback, I'll forget it immediately," is a layered response. Politeness on the surface, firmness beneath. It doesn't erupt like a counterattack, but lands with quiet finality. It shows that you can receive input without allowing entry. In a world where people speak freely, without weighing the damage of their words, such quiet filtration is one of the highest forms of inner strength. 7. You really do work hard at making yourself look foolish. No need to attack. Just let them confront their own reflection. Communication is more than the exchange of information. It's a reflection of a character. Every word, gesture, and expression reveals something of a person's inner world, their values, and their awareness. Some, though unaware, consistently expose their ignorance or immaturity through boastful speech, excessive behavior, or subtle disdain for others. They fail to see that the effort to assert themselves by belittling others only renders them absurd and unlikable. In such moments, the phrase "you really do work hard at making yourself look foolish" becomes a particularly effective response, not to insult, but to give the other person a chance to see themselves clearly. The strength of this reaction lies not in its harshness, but in its mirror-like quality. It does not strike at the person's character or worth, but simply highlights the visible consequence of their behavior, delivered with humor but unmistakable clarity. Rather than say they are foolish, you point out that their persistent efforts to impress are doing the opposite. That very hard work, repeatedly engaging in unwise conduct, exposes the gap in their self-awareness. This phrase proves most effective when the other person is trying to show superiority. They might mock others, speak with arrogance, or offer what they think are clever remarks that lack substance. To them, it feels like confidence, strength, intelligence. But to others, it's a sequence of behaviors that makes them seem shallow, insecure, and transparently self-serving. You really do work hard at making yourself look foolish lays bare the gap between how they see themselves and how they are actually seen. By using this response, you maintain your composure and avoid pointless debate. Rather than counter each claim or argue point by point, you reflect the outcome of their own actions. This leaves them with no easy ground to defend. Because you're not attacking a single mistake, you're pointing to a pattern, a sustained effort that produces the opposite result. That, more than any insult, lands the deepest. Its power lies not in volume, but in the pause it provokes. They can't respond easily, because if they react in anger, they validate your point. If they ignore it, the sting still lingers, knowing they've been exposed. And if they are at all self-aware, a question will quietly take root. Am I really doing that? Once asked, that question begins to erode the false confidence they have built. It's worth noting, this line is humorous and ironic, but not cruel. When used properly, with a calm tone, no mocking smile, no theatrical delivery, it avoids being a personal attack. Instead, it becomes a gentle but firm wake-up call. This is the difference between a reckless outburst and a measured response. The latter is where this phrase belongs, a communication tool for those who understand the precision of words. In public settings, or when others are present, the phrase creates a ripple effect. It invites observers to reassess the behavior as well. The one being addressed doesn't just feel logically cornered. They feel exposed, spotlighted, aware that their carefully built image is crumbling under observation. The more witnesses there are, the more this truth is magnified through their silent judgment. This isn't a line to use often, nor is it fit for every situation. It should only appear when the other person has crossed a line, no longer offering opinions, but using speech as a weapon to dominate, manipulate, or wound. In such cases, the phrase is not an attack. It's a shield, a sharp one perhaps, but used with restraint and precision. It protects your calm while setting a firm boundary. The phrase, "You really do work hard at making yourself look foolish," also carries a layer of commentary on behavioral repetition. It's not about a single slip. It highlights a systematic pattern. Pointing that out prevents the behavior from being dismissed as an isolated event. You're not reacting to one sentence. You're reflecting an entire mode of conduct, and people may overlook a single misstep, but they'll grow wary of someone who repeats the same flawed approach again and again, whether by habit or intention. From a Stoic perspective, this response aligns with the principle of controlled reaction. You don't yell. You don't counter with a flood of arguments. You simply state, briefly, clearly, with full weight, the reality of what's happening. In doing so, you halt the toxic momentum and re-establish balance in the exchange. Your refusal to be provoked is already a victory, but the moment you make them see the reflection they've been avoiding, that's the finishing stroke. In the end, you really do work hard at making yourself look foolish. Isn't an insult. It's a mirror placed at the right time, in the right place. It demands no change, but exerts enough pressure to make one think. No raised voice, no prolonged argument. You remain composed. You define the boundary, and you make it clear. Their behavior speaks louder than they know, and it's showing them in a light they'd rather not see. I used to think that reacting instantly to insults was a way to protect myself, but over time, I realized what I was defending wasn't dignity. It was an injured ego, and the more I reacted, the more I handed over control of my emotions to someone else. When I began practicing the calm responses you've just seen, my life changed. No more pointless arguments. No lingering frustration after every confrontation. Instead, I felt free because I was no longer governed by other people's words. I started to see clearly. Selective silence is a form of power. In daily life, provocations are everywhere. A friend's sarcastic remark, a colleague dismissing your effort, or a stranger leaving a negative comment on easy. In those moments, you don't need to fight. Just remain still, respond with composure, and let your calm presence become the thing they have to reckon with. Practicing Stoicism isn't about becoming cold or detached. It's about choosing what truly deserves your attention. And along that path, I believe each of us can become a steadier, stronger, and more unshakable version of ourselves, day by day. If this video helped you see things from a different angle, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you won't miss future content on willpower and inner mastery, because sometimes the way we remain silent speaks louder than anything we could ever say. See you in the next video.